Everyone, Tim Schofield here, and it's time to do a full review on the Blu R1 HD. And what makes this device so interesting is that you have an option to save money and get the device with ads on your lock screen. Now, the model that I have been using is the $60 model. It does come with ads. You have 16 gigs of internal storage along with 2 gigabytes of RAM. Now, with that being said, you do have a model that does not have ads, and you're going to pay about $50 extra for that. But let's go ahead and get into the full review. I want to talk about my experience with these ads, along with just the device in general, because it is $60, which is very inexpensive. So let's get started. To start, I want to talk about design of the R1 HD, and it's got a bit of a smaller build. It has a 5-inch display, so it fits nicely in your hand. First thing I want to talk about is the back casing, because it has a little bit of grip to it, so it's a little bit easier to hold on to. It's not sticky by any means. I do personally like the feel of it. Adds a nice little grip to it. Now on the back you have your speaker, which performance is honestly not that great. First of all, it's facing the back. Second of all, it doesn't really get that loud, and sound quality is really not that great either. So keep in mind though, $60, you have to make some sacrifices. Up at the top here, you have your 8-megapixel camera and flash, and this back casing actually does come off. So I'm going to pull this off real quick, and then you'll see on the back here you have dual SIM card slots along with the micro SD card slot. So that's a great addition, that micro SD card slot, up to 64 gigs. So keep that in mind. Continuing on, you have a 3.5 millimeter headphone jack up at the top. Make note of that little camera bump. We'll talk about that in just a second. On the right side here, you do have volume rockers and a power button, which are textured the exact same. The buttons aren't cheap by any means. They're not super premium feeling either when you press them. They're just fine. They're pretty standard buttons. On the left side here, you have absolutely nothing. And then down at the bottom, you have a microphone and a micro USB slot. So no Type-C, which you really can't expect on a budget device like this. And in terms of charging speeds, it really does not have any turbocharging capabilities. Since charging speeds aren't as good as other devices, I have found I carried around a bit of a portable battery pack, this Easy ACC one, which is 20,000 milliamp hours and also can charge 4 devices at once. And I found that's really great to have, obviously, if you carry around multiple devices, especially if you use this as maybe a burner phone, for example. And then also it has 2 inputs, so you can charge it with 2 inputs at once. And just overall, having 20,000 milliamp hours, you really don't need to charge this that much. It has a flashlight, which is kind of a novelty. I really never use a flashlight, but it's great that you can charge multiple devices at once with it. I'll link to it in the description if you're interested. But yeah, so since that's the case, you can't really get a lot of charge out of it if you throw it on the charger for 10-15 minutes. You really kind of have to have it on the charger for a decent amount of time before you get a substantial amount of charge. Now on the front of the device, you have Blu's logo, and then up at the top, you have a 5-megapixel camera with an LED flash. I'll talk about that when I talk about the camera, some sensors, and an earpiece. Now, when it comes to that camera bump, just want to give you an idea of how that affects it. It does rock just a little bit when it's flat on the desk. It's not too much of an inconvenience. It doesn't rock too much. It is a big enough device where the rocking's not crazy. You really have to press on the ends for it to really rock and affect. So overall, not too big of a deal to me. Now, I'm going to get to software and performance later on, but I want to talk about the ads because that's such a big thing with this device. So moving on, I want to talk about the ads. So first of all, you'll see I have a notification on my lock screen. With that, it couples with another ad just below it. It has a line separating it, so you know it's obviously not a specific notification. And they do change. You don't get the same one over and over. You will see multiples. So if I unlock it, lock the screen, go back into it, you're going to see another ad. So a brand new one. You can actually swipe them away if you don't want to see them and you want to read all your notifications. That's just fine. But now, when you actually have no notifications, you can occasionally get a full screen ad right there. So it does change depending on how many notifications are there. And then if you do tap on it, it actually acts just like you would interact with a notification. It's going to load this up. You'll see I tapped on this and it loaded up the specific thing on Amazon's app. Gives you all the information on it. So if you are signed in, you can add it to your cart or do anything in particular in relation to this ad. So you shop now for this specific toothbrush. Very interesting. And then now I want to talk about performance. And I have noticed really no performance difference with these ads. It's actually been really great in terms of lock screen. Isn't stuttering at all in general, loading things up. The ads don't take time to load. I don't ever see a loading screen on any of these ads. I think it has them preset, and then if you tap on it, it's when it actually starts to load the specific thing on your Amazon app or your web page. So overall, you do get used to the ads being there. It's really not too much of an inconvenience for me, and it doesn't really affect performance. So I would say go with the ad-supported version if you can obviously handle seeing ads on your lock screen, not being able to customize the wallpaper in your lock screen. So keep that in mind. But to me, it's worth saving the money to actually get the ads on your lock screen. Moving on, I do want to talk about that 5-inch 720p IPS LCD display. And overall, it's a solid 720p display. It's really not crazy eye-popping. It's not a 2K display that you can expect out of flagship devices, but overall it gets the job done. It is protected with Gorilla Glass 3. Viewing angles are fine. Outside, I do wish it got a little bit brighter, but I guess overall when you're watching certain videos, etc., it does the job. To be completely honest, it's not bad by any means. It does the job, and it's a little bit better than what you would expect from a $60 device. Now, there are some customizations that you can make. So if you jump into settings and pop into display settings, there's mirror vision. So right away, it's ways you can customize the way your display looks. You have picture mode, you have standard, you have vivid, and then a user mode. So user mode is where you can actually customize everything. So you have contrast, saturation. So if you see, you can change the contrast right here. Let's see, you have saturation levels that you can change as well. And it gives you the before and after, so you can actually really customize the way it looks. Picture brightness as well, if you want to go ahead and change that. Sharpness, color temperature. So you'll see so many various things that you can customize, which is always great. Customization on Android is one of the biggest things. And being able to choose how your display looks and the best way for it to look is really great. Also, one thing I'll notice is inconsistencies with these buttons down at the bottom. You'll see it has a white background, for example, and then when you go to the home screen, it's completely clear, as it should be. So occasionally you'll get that is a bit of an issue. Not too big of a deal. That's more of a software issue. More software information will come later. Now, in terms of battery life, it has a 2500 milliamp hour embedded battery, and I've been pleased with battery life, actually. With that smaller of a battery, I have consistently gotten a little bit over 4 hours screen on time. So it essentially gets me just about through the day, and I've been very pleased with it. Coupled with Android Marshmallow, it does a very good job with its processor, and obviously with the display being 720p and overall processing power, battery life has been good. So that hasn't been too big of an issue. The only issue is that charging a little bit slow, as I mentioned. So occasionally, if you do absolutely need a charge, it's going to take a bit of time to charge. It's also worth noting that there is no NFC in this device, so that's a sacrifice you're going to have to make. No NFC, so no Android Pay, and no transferring files between the device by tapping the backs. Moving on, let's talk about that 8-megapixel rear camera. Loading time is fine. I have noticed the viewfinder is just a little bit laggy when moving it around. Nothing too crazy. And honestly, the camera is one of the weak points of this device, is where another sacrifice is made. So here's just a bit of a settings button. You can shoot 1080p video as well. Video quality is just meh, honestly. Picture size, you have a bunch of settings. You have, obviously, professional mode, which a lot of people asked about. It does have, you can change your ISO, white balance, sharpness, exposure, and your color saturation as well. Panorama, face beauty, an HDR mode, a night mode for dark shots, and then, as usual, the normal mode. So it's snapping a quick picture. Obviously, a great lighting situation. It turns out just fine. It looks great. I do want to show you guys a couple pictures. So let's go ahead and take a look at this low light picture. And when you are in low light, things get pretty grainy. The only time I think picture quality is just fine is when you are in good lighting conditions and it's a bit of a close-up. You'll see here, this looks pretty good. A close-up with the raindrops and the green color on the leaves. But even when you're in a good lighting situation and you're far away, things do get grainy. Overall, I would not expect to take great pictures with this device. It's definitely one of the weak points. Here's just another darker lighting situation where things do get grainy. So overall, I would say do not expect to necessarily take some fantastic shots with this camera. It is a weak point. Even at the $60 price point, I guess it is just about what you would expect from a camera. Now, talking about that front-facing camera, I really take no selfies. But here I am talking. You do have that LED flash, so to show that off, there we go. So you see the flicker right there. Great in lower lighting situations. I guess if you do take a lot of selfies, that's great. I guess selfies in the dark if you're at the bar or something, for example. But overall, weak point on the device, but it is kind of what you would expect for a device that is so inexpensive. Now, I want to go ahead and talk about performance and some specs. Overall, loading times on higher-end things do take a little bit longer than you'll be used to. It has a MediaTek MT6735 quad-core processor coupled with 1 or 2 gigabytes of RAM, depending on the model. Like I mentioned earlier, you definitely should upgrade to that 2 gigs just for the multitasking benefits in general. And overall, playing high-end games, they work, but you will see occasional frame rate drops. It will stutter a little bit in the menus, but you can definitely play these higher-end games. Just expect a little bit of a performance difference compared to more flagship devices, and that's expected. Obviously, you got to expect something like that. And then when it comes to multitasking, you can't necessarily do crazy heavy multitasking, but it still does a decent job at performing well. You see that minimized the game pretty quickly. Let's go ahead and go to the calculator. Let's go ahead and hop back into the Play Store, and you'll see it's loading these up just fine. Let's go to the clock, maybe hop back into the camera, take a quick picture. Just doing a lot of basic multitasking. If you're going to do some heavy multitasking, I wouldn't necessarily think it's going to handle it well, especially if you have a higher end game running. So let's go ahead and go back to that game now after doing all of those things and see. You'll see it is still on that on the pause screen of the game. You can just hop right back into the game. Now, if you had 1 gig of RAM, you might actually have to reload the game if you do a bunch of things in the background. So depending on your usage scenario, but overall, I've been very pleased with the performance. It is kind of how you'd expect. Actually, it's above average to what I would expect. And like I mentioned earlier, when you're using it with those ads, really no performance hit at all. Things are responsive. Things are fairly quick when you're running through screens. Really no essentially frame rate drops when you're doing basic tasks. You will get them when you're doing high-end gaming, etc. But I've been very pleased with performance. One more thing to take note of is that GPS can be a little bit spotty at times. I find it works fairly well most of the time, but occasionally you might get it lose GPS or have you in the wrong location, but eventually it'll catch up to you and actually put you in the right spot. Now here we go, let's finish off the software section. I talked about it earlier in this video. I want to go ahead and go to About Device. It does come with Android 6.0, so not 6.0.1 the latest, but it is on Marshmallow right now. And of course, with Blue and I guess Amazon at the moment, updates are kind of in question on how soon it will actually get updated to Android Nougat. We'll find out in the future. I'll keep you guys updated on that. But overall, you'll see, like I mentioned earlier, that those soft keys having a fill just kind of bothers me a little bit. But very similar to stock Android experience. And I think this device, with its performance, really shows off how great Android is when it's run without a huge skin over the top in general. You do have audio profile shortcut. You have a nice flashlight shortcut. Obviously, very stock looking, even stock looking settings. Only that display change is really the only difference. And of course, you have an separate Amazon settings option. But again, you always get those great benefits of Marshmallow in terms of per app basis permissions. You have do not disturb modes, alarms only, etc. Just overall a very stock experience on this device, and I think that's something people are really going to like, especially when it comes to performance. They do have a clear all button on the recents, which is obviously added by them. But again, this really makes Android shine on a device that has, I guess, a lower end processor along with 2 gigabytes of RAM. Just really shows what Android can do when it's not heavily skinned. Also worth noting in terms of bloatware, it does come with a lot of Amazon apps, as you can see right here. So just kind of keep that in mind. And again, that's kind of what's expected when you buy a device from Amazon, when you get it a little bit cheaper with ads. So there is some Amazon apps pre-installed. All right, so just want to give some final thoughts on the R1 HD. And yes, you are going to have to make some sacrifices. That's just a standard when it comes to budget devices, especially a device at a $60 price point, a sacrifice of ads on the lock screen, a sacrifice of camera quality, a sacrifice of speaker quality. But I have been very impressed with the performance on the device. I've been very impressed with the battery life as well on this device. And of course, it's great that ads don't necessarily inhibit the performance, and also they're not super intrusive either. You can swipe them away. Yeah, you'll have a full screen lock screen ad, but that's really not too big of a deal in my opinion. So if you're in the market, I would definitely recommend this device. Again, you do have to make some sacrifices, as I mentioned earlier, and it really shows off what a stock Android experience can do. Very minimalistic skin at all, and it's great. Honestly, performance has been very good. I've been very pleased. So overall, definitely like the Blue R1 HD for the price point and the market that it's geared towards. So check it out. I'll link to everything in the description. Hopefully you enjoyed this review video. Lots more to come on a bunch of different devices. Note 7 coming soon as well. Obviously opposite end of the spectrum in terms of pricing, but there you have it. Subscribe to my channel if you like this video. I'd appreciate it. Click that thumbs up as well. And as always, guys, thank you very much for watching.